LA fires at a high risk of catastrophic spread. Newsom and California stand their ground against Trump. And Trump's cabinet picks put to the test. This and more on Dangerous Waters. This is the Dangerous Waters podcast where we dive deep into dangerous waters. I'm your host, Alex, and in today's episode, we got quite a few topics to cover. Let's talk about the Los Angeles fires. Already, we have 24 deaths confirmed. Another 16 people are missing, although there are still more people at large, and it's hard to say if those numbers will continue to spread. But right now, we have new winds coming in today through Wednesday, which could potentially make the flames even more engulfing and contaminate even more areas of Los Angeles. So let's hope they're able to clear this thing up. As of now, the latest news says that the Palisades fire, the most monumental one so far, is 13% contained. The Eaton fire is 27% contained. Hearst fire, 89% contained, so good progress there. Right now, let's just see how they're able to continue this effort. We already got Los Angeles National Guard cracking down on looters. Also, potential arsonists have been arrested as well. I really do believe this is a man-made fire. The circumstances behind it, the amount of arrests, especially the one with the blowtorch, things are not really adding up for it to be a natural disaster. Potentially, these are sleeper agents from other countries or even from, who knows, domestic agencies who want to rustle things up before the inauguration. I really don't know. I don't want to speculate too much, but I don't believe that these are natural in origin. In any case, let's just give our best prayers to the firefighters and to the response forces there and hope that they're able to contain this as quickly as possible. For our next story, we have one coming in from California again, this time concerning Gavin Newsom and the state of California. Very big news here. California has built up a $50 million strong fund to what they say Trump-proof the state of California. Essentially what this means is $25 million has been included for the State Department of Justice to basically go against Trump's agenda in the federal government in court after Trump's election in November. And then another $25 million will be going to defend aliens from being deported from America. So combined total of $50 million that will be used for legal funds to essentially fight against Trump's policies on the federal level. This is something that we've already said was going to happen. You have a lot of these Democrats coming in and saying, oh, we're not going to oppose Trump's inauguration or his confirmation as president, but what we will do is we will fight him every step of the way in the federal government, in state courts, whatever it may be, but legislatively in the courts, there's going to be a bloodbath. There's going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of battles going on. Trump also has armed himself pretty well with lawyers, so expect there to be moves, counter moves, all sorts of legal proceedings. It's going to be a mess. Let's see if anything can get done in the next administration, especially on the domestic level. All right, for our third story of the day, Trump's cabinet picks will be put to test this week, many of them at least, the highest profile one being Pete Hegseth. Essentially, the Senate hearings are going to happen, the hearings for the confirmation of Trump's cabinet picks. Pete Hegseth is the one to look out for. Let's see if he's able to pass his test. I really do believe he stands a strong chance on being able to be confirmed this week by the Senate. Now, the question really remains is, will these be easy confirmations, sweeping confirmations of most of Trump's appointees? As of now, we have around a dozen or so appointees being put to the test. Most of them are not really too significant, so they will probably get passed considering the precedent of cabinet picks being pushed through. However, the more controversial ones, Pete Hegseth, I think, stands a really strong chance, as I said. But we also have RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, with Gabbard being the probably least likely to make it. Let's see if she's able to do it at the end. However, both of these figures are not going to be put to the test this week. Their confirmation hearings are still pending and have not been scheduled yet, probably because there are still holdouts in the Republican side that are hesitant to confirm these figures. Quite controversial, especially with Tulsi Gabbard having a background in the cult and some foreign policy stances that are not too favorable with the mainstream Republican side. So it's going to be a contentious fight. She's probably not ready for it yet in terms of securing the votes, so she really needs to continue her efforts to sway over the Republican senators and potentially have a way into the White House. However, right now it's still really tough to say if that's going to be possible. Let's talk about international news. Our first topic coming in related to the Israel-Hamas potential truce and ceasefire. Biden and Netanyahu just had a call. They are looking forward to potentially having a ceasefire on this whole war. Right now, the Israeli side has already agreed with mediators such as Egypt, the UAE, and other partners. They have already come to terms with a potential negotiating position, and Hamas has around 24 or so hours to respond to this ceasefire proposal. Already right now, the betting markets are saying that by January 31st, there is a roughly 3/4 chance of a ceasefire happening. Never trust the betting markets because they don't really know things too well either, but it really goes to show that there is strong momentum here, that there is potentially going to be a ceasefire coming, especially with Trump saying that all hell will break loose if Hamas does not agree to a ceasefire before January 20th. This would include, according to Trump administration officials, destroying Hamas leadership as well as sanctioning other countries such as Iran even further for supporting Hamas efforts. So already the momentum is there. There are currently 94 Israeli hostages, many of them 34 or so roughly assumed to be presumed dead already in Gaza, and Israel wants around 30 or so of these back as per the initial phase of the ceasefire. Now, no matter what, Israel may be in a militarily strong position, but always fighting in these wars is not really in Israel's interests, economically at least. There are struggles going on with the domestic sector. A lot of the economy has been geared toward war, and it's affecting people's daily lives. And as well, you have the hostages, families of the hostages. They are begging Netanyahu's administration to end the war. But you got to remember, with Middle Eastern politics, it's really hard to predict what will actually happen. A lot of posturing, a lot of moving around, but ultimately the result is not very predictable and not easily predictable. So these situations evolve very rapidly, and right now it's really not in my position to say what I think is going to happen, but you do have these two possibilities. A ceasefire, which will include probably permanent Israeli occupation in Gaza at the expense of Hamas. However, Hamas will have some time to regroup or potentially leave the country. Or you have Trump coming into office with a scorched earth attitude and completely sending the American military to Gaza, or airstriking the hell out of Gaza and the Hamas bases that are left. So it's really going to be one or the other. I really don't see a third option right now. So let's hope that Hamas is able to come to their senses and recognize the gravity of the geopolitical forces, the lack of Iran's support, as well as Lebanon no longer being part of this fight. But no matter what, Hamas's position has been completely crippled and much, much weaker than what it was before, probably the weakest in modern history. They don't really have much left to gain or lose at this point, so that could influence how things go. Let's talk about the Ukraine war. Now, we have recent developments of North Korean soldiers being captured by the Ukrainian side. A lot of Russian propaganda coming out saying that, oh, the Ukrainians are lying about this, that they're coming up with every possible excuse to say that North Koreans are in the war. However, they've never even captured a single soldier. Well, now they have. They've captured 2 soldiers, those soldiers being alive and in pretty decent condition. So they are also going to be allowing journalists access to interview these soldiers. There will probably be a lot of good information coming out of this. But not only that, North Korea has been conducting quite a strong support of Russia recently, giving them all sorts of military equipment and the troops. And this is really not good for Ukraine. Already the front lines are not very well balanced, with Russia having massive artillery advantages over the Ukrainian side. And then you combine with the North Korean troops and their strategy to counter drones and counter Ukrainian forces. It's really brutal. it's a lot of bum rushing. Think China during the Korean War, just sending waves of human meat toward the enemy. And it's sad to see this, really. The North Korean side, they are not really willing to defect to the Ukrainian side either. They see this, I guess, as a duty to Kim Jong-un, their leader, their glorious supreme leader that they must always look up to. It's brainwashing 101. But this is unfortunately the reality that is happening from the North Korean side, and that is affecting the dynamics of the war in Ukraine. Ukraine really has to step up their conscription efforts. Unfortunately, if they want to fight this out with Russia, there's really no other way. They need the manpower, or they could come to the negotiating table and try to put an end to this with Trump coming into office. I really hope that they come to their senses, because if they do not, they will end up losing a lot more men than they already have. Already, you have millions of Ukrainians who have left the country, so there isn't as large of a population that they can pull from. Russia having a much larger population, so over the long term, I really do believe Russia potentially has an advantage from the war of attrition aspect. However, it's just best to not test it out, just talk it out. Go to the negotiating table. Trump will be there. He will make sure that both sides get something out of it, I believe. And hopefully that agreement, if it does come to fruition, will be much better than the Minsk agreements in the past, which did fail and did potentially lead to this current war. Now, with that being said, we also have news of the ramifications of these war efforts. Right now, the United States has upped its ante on sanctions against Russian oil, and this has actually affected Russia in a pretty substantial way. Recently, China has stopped the imports of Russian oil from tankers that were potentially going to come into Chinese ports and offload the oil. China obviously requires a large amount of oil and gas from other countries. However, they have been more and more leaning toward Russia in the past few years to try to gain access to their resources at a much cheaper cost than it would from Middle Eastern partners or Australia, for example. But this recent action is very substantial because it shows that China is willing to listen to U.S. sanctions and is probably a move in good faith toward the upcoming Trump administration to say, look, we are following international law. We want to get a deal done with you. So this is good. This is a good development by China. It shows that they know who's in charge and they know who is probably the better partner to be working with here. But at the same time, not just China, India has also stopped Russian oil imports into the country. India used to be a large Russian crude oil refining area where they would refine the raw oil and then send it to Europe so Europe can use it at a cheaper price than, let's say, American imports of the same resources. However, India has also just pledged to stop importing this oil, which will be a major problem for Europe. Ultimately, Europe is the loser in this case because Europe needs the oil to manufacture and to sustain themselves as a highly developed society. However, now they are getting cut off from the Russian oil that they used to rely on, and once that was cut off, they used to rely on these middlemen imports of still Russian oil just refined in other countries. Now that's being cut off as well. So they really only have the United States to back them up, which really puts Europe in an even weaker position compared to the United States than before. And that's already, monumental because Europe used to be already in the firm grip of the United States and now even more so. So these sanctions are going to probably have a strong strategic effect and will limit Russia's access to financial resources, which will then force them to loan more money, borrow more money from their banks, and potentially cause a financial crisis down the line. Well, that wraps it up for today's episode of Dangerous Waters. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And as always, I will see you all in the next one.